Hey, this is Pat Barrett on the 4th of July, 2026. And I wanted to do what people do, 4th of July speeches, and quote from people who have stressed in their conversations with the American people. In other words, they were addressing Americans. And they stressed the fact that we are one people no matter where we come from. And I did want to, first of all, honor our First Nations. And I need to get a different shirt because clearly that emphasizes the warlike character of Native Americans, a stereotype. And that stereotype justified removing Native Americans from the land and in many cases committing atrocities against them. So we need a different shirt if I want to keep doing this. But before I go to the quotes, I want to give a little background. 250 years ago, nationality and race, gender were not issues. And the great divider in that time was religion. This is, remember, the late 1700s we're talking about. And nations, as we know them, were just being born out of the American Revolution and the French Revolution a few years later. Italy and Germany were not nations and did not become nations until 100 years later. When our founders gathered to bring forth a new nation, to quote Lincoln, they were indeed all Christians, albeit nominal Christians, with a sprinkling of agnostics. They were a motley crew in some ways. But the division between Baptists and Methodists, which nowadays we regard as trivial, loomed pretty large in those days. And so something brought them together, and also different regions, north and south, very, very different from each other. And the answer to what brought them together lies in the rest of that quote: to bring forth a new nation conceived in liberty. And liberty is what characterizes the United States. And so down through 250 years, that nation, our nation, grew to include women as citizens and the descendants of slaves as citizens. Moreover, nationality has not been any bar to becoming an American if you come here. An oath of allegiance to the Constitution, not to the nation, not to the United States, not to America, least of all to the president, to the Constitution. That, and a handshake. That's important, and a handshake. That makes you an American, whether you're a Pole or a Russian, a Norwegian or a Nigerian, Chinese, Korean, Mexican, Peruvian, you're still an American. Now, an American of 5 minutes ago on that handshake is as American as someone who traces their roots back 200 years in this country. So on all 4th of July occasions, we have to have quotes. And these voices, they go back before the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. And back when religion was the divider, keep that in mind as I read these. I need my notes, get the quotes right. It's interesting, the person who wrote this is writing about something called civic thought. And it really opened my eyes to something I talked about in a video a short time ago, which was the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at ASU. And I used to go to their lectures, my wife and I did. And one of our group, a young lady, said, these this thing is kind of a stalking horse for conservatives to bring conservatives onto the campus. Well, that's fine. Didn't see a problem there, but over time, I noticed the speakers became less like a liberal and a conservative debating, which was great, to more and more conservative leaning. And eventually we stopped going. And it's interesting to see that this is actually a movement within conservatism to bring conservative thought onto campus. But again, that's what we're about. That's diversity, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what these quotes talk about is how our diversity makes us one people despite our diversity, or as some would say, because of our diversity. Okay? So I want to start with a really long time ago, 1635, Roger Williams. And he got kicked out of, I told you, religion. He got kicked out of Rhode Island by the Puritans because he didn't agree with them. And what he said was that other worships, what we would say denominations, other worships, or even other religions, other worships could be peaceable and quiet subjects, loving and helpful neighbors, fair and just dealers, true and loyal to the civil government. When that's neighbors, I think of those people in Minneapolis who protected their neighbors by blowing whistles when ICE was coming for them. It's fantastic. And then Peter Stuyvesant, I know I studied him in high school briefly, of New York. He was coming down on people called Quakers, another denomination. And so these were Calvinists. Now, they're not Quakers. Calvinists are precursors to the Presbyterians. And but they didn't like what was happening with the Quakers, so they wrote, and they said, the law of love, peace, and liberty in the states extends to Jews, Turks, and Egyptians, as they are considered sons of Adam. Our desire is not to offend one of these little ones in whatsoever form, name, or title he appears in, whether Presbyterian, Independent, Baptist, or Quaker, but shall be glad to see anything of God in them, any of them, desiring to do unto all men as we desire all men should do unto us. That's the golden rule, right? And then the Jews in the Revolutionary times turned to George Washington when he became president, and they wanted to know how they would be treated, because many other countries, Jews, there were special laws applied against Jews, and they wanted to know how the country would treat them. So George Washington wrote to a synagogue, and this is called Letter to the Hebrew Congregation of Newport, Rhode Island. The government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction and persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves good citizens. May the children of the stock of Abraham sit in safety under their own vine and fig, and let there be none to make them afraid. Sort of biblical references, stock of Abraham, vine and fig. People in those days were pretty well steeped in the Bible. Now we move forward to Abraham Lincoln, considered our greatest president by most. And he was at a hotel, and there was a crowd out, and he addressed them. And he said the crowd should be proud to be direct descendants of the founders. 4th of July, patriotism. They were iron men, Lincoln said. They fought for the principles that they were contending for. And then Lincoln pointed out that many president could not trace their ancestry back to the founders. See, Lincoln bringing everyone together. How should the nation view these immigrants? Here's what he said. When they look through that old Declaration of Independence, they find that those old men say that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they have a right to claim it as though they were blood of the blood and flesh of the flesh of the men who wrote the Declaration. And so they are. That is the electric cord in that declaration that links the hearts of patriotic and liberty-loving men together, that will link those patriotic hearts as long as the love of freedom exists in the minds of men throughout the world. Okay, everyone's included. And I think that, we can find many more wonderful quotes. But at this point, I want to point out that in future episodes, I will be addressing some of the attacks on this concept of a group of diverse and free people living together in peace and harmony. Thank you, and happy 4th of July. Subscribe, like, whatever, comment. Love it. Thanks.